All right, welcome back. You're still watching the morning show here on Arise News. Now, the historic G20 summit in Johannesburg, the first ever on African soil, surpassed expectations, with South African President Cyril Ramaphosa standing firm despite pressure from US President Donald Trump. Arise correspondent Adesuwa Giwa-Osagie reports.
The G20 summit in South Africa has come to an end, and the world is asking, are the results reached this weekend going to be symbolic, or are they going to be actually effective? One thing is for sure, South African President Cyril Ramaphosa has risen to the moment. He has shown that Africa is ready for the world stage. South Africa, eager to demonstrate its readiness to lead on the world stage, transformed the Johannesburg Expo Center at Nasrec into a fortress of innovation and hospitality. Delegates and media passed through state-of-the-art facial recognition gates, while inside the venue overflowed with food, drinks, and entertainment for its global dignitaries. Across the halls, one sentiment was unmistakable. South Africans were proud of President Cyril Ramaphosa's leadership.
As a South African, I'm very proud that we pulled it off. President Trump or members of his administration, they attacked South Africa 18 times this year. They really wanted to upend this G20. So to have pulled it off and to secure world values like solidarity, equality, sustainability, each with programmatic impact.
Leadership exercised under the looming shadow of threats from the United States President Donald Trump.
Presence of a country that was not here. And it was sort of like a rainstorm on the horizon that might or might not break onto the land below. And in a sense, I think it's appropriate to say that the Trump administration took a wild swing at this and didn't hit the ball.
The Minister of International Relations, Ronald Lumalo, reminded the world that the summit was bigger than any single nation.
What we have done was to affirm the multilateral institution that is the G20, and South Africa stands very firm from the beginning that the agenda that we have set for the G20 is relevant, it's important for the Global South, it's important for our continent, the issues of solidarity, equality, and sustainability.
As the summit drew to a close, South African journalists delivered a final message. They burst into a Zulu song whose English meaning carried a sharp, unmistakable edge. Your mother will beg you, not us. A moment of defiance and a declaration that Africa's voice has arrived on the global stage. Adesuwa Giwa-Osagie, Arise News, Johannesburg.
All right, let's cross live now to Johannesburg, where our correspondent Adesuwa Giwa-Osagie joins us for a review of the G20 summit. Adesuwa, Sanibonani, my sister, how is Johannesburg?
Oh, good morning, Zimba. Good morning, Dr. Baki, and good morning, Ayo. It is a beautiful rainy day here in Johannesburg. Very odd weather for December, but here we have it.
All right. Oh, fantastic. We've seen the highlights of the program, and I'd love for you to take us through a little bit of it, specifically the leaders' declaration, which normally comes at the end of the G20 summit. But I understand Cyril Ramaphosa was worried that it might be sabotage, so he instead started the summit with it. Can you give us a little bit more insight into how some of these things played out?
You're absolutely right. There were reports that Cyril Ramaphosa was worried that it might be sabotaged by Argentina. They were seen as a sort of America's de facto backers out of the G20 summit. Usually the declaration comes at the end of the summit, but right after his opening remarks, he went straight into asking for the adoption of the declaration, saying that he felt that there was unanimous consensus or almost unanimous consensus. Now, that declaration is actually very detailed. The G20 Sherpas, who are the diplomats that were negotiating that declaration, did so over about 5 days and reportedly finalized the language by 8:30 a.m. on Friday. Initially, there was some pushback from Argentina, Saudi Arabia, and Russia, but it seems that with Russia and Saudi Arabia, that was fully ironed out. But when it came to Argentina, they did say that they took issue with some language, particularly language around Gaza. However, they agreed with the general idea of the declaration in the end. But we have seen this from Argentina in past G20 meetings. Now, that declaration, of course, features Africa heavily, mentioning the word Africa 80 times. And the South African President Cyril Ramaphosa, four important areas. One is the mobilization of funds for just energy transition, particularly for Africa and the global South. Two is the leveraging of our minerals here for inclusive growth. Three is debt sustainability and having better debt terms, particularly with money at the IMF and the World Bank. And finally, it's the response to disasters and relief across the world, and of course, the crisis that we're facing. So that's sort of what we got for the declaration. But Cyril Ramaphosa pulled a fast one, calling for the adoption right after his opening remarks. And I believe I heard on the hot mic there, Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala saying to the president that she was proud of him.
Thank you very much. And that's what the sentiments that's running through, not just in South Africa, but across the African continent. Now, this G20, being the first on the African continent in South Africa, gave an opportunity for the conversations to prioritize the global South and the African continent through conversations, decisions made. I'd like you to highlight some of the areas where Africa shone brightly, especially as, like I said earlier on, first time here on the continent, despite the challenges, despite the boycott by some heavyweights like America, Chinese, Xi Jinping wasn't there as well. What were some of the finest moments for the African continent?
I think this was a very fine moment for the African continent, but not just the continent as a whole, but the global South. We've been discussing here how it does seem like this is the rise of the middle powers. We've been talking about the multipolar world for a very long time. But when we saw the Brazilian president with Ramaphosa, the camaraderie there was very strong. We saw the same thing with Indonesia's representative. We've seen essentially the middle powers coming to the table together and being like, we need a better world. And in order for us to demand a better world, we must work together. It seems that it was a net positive, actually, that America was not there, because it allowed for India and Brazil and South Africa to seek each other out. It allowed for Nigeria and Namibia to both speak about the importance of equity when it comes to our mineral resources, but also it talks about debt sustainability and utilizing all those things together. It seems also, and not just because we're talking about Africa, because, you know, today the Africa Union EU summit begins in Angola. And it does seem that the European powers, who were caught a little bit with their pants down when it came to Donald Trump's backing of Putin with the Russia-Ukraine war, it seems that they are also seeking partnerships here with African nations, and they're taking it very, very seriously. Even in Germany, for example, where they are now looking at possibly having to recruit young men into their army and shore up their defenses over the next 5 years, they're looking at African nations, they're looking at our minerals, they're looking at our young population as an opportunity for also their own growth.
Okay, hello. Definitely, I will have something to say. Great job, Adesuwa, and congratulations to South Africa for hosting this summit, despite the boycott by Javier Milei of Argentina, Claudia Sheinbaum of Mexico, Russian President Vladimir Putin, who, by the way, is being looked for internationally, and also Xi Jinping, who has not been showing up at international fora. However, in terms of the declarations, now there's some disagreement there, and you can imagine, or you already know where it is coming from, the United States. The declaration that the G20 countries will commit to climate change, which America is against. 2, that they will work towards gender equality. 3, that they will support the cause of peace in every part of the world, including Sudan, Democratic Republic of Congo. Anna Kelly has accused South Africa of weaponizing the G20 presidency to attack the founding principles of the G20. But the big issue here is the courage, in my view, I don't know what you think, demonstrated by President Ramaphosa when he banged the gavel and said he, as president of South Africa, will not hand over to a junior official. Now, how did that play out in the real sense? Now South Africa says America can go and meet the ambassador and collect the instrument, but, you know, what is the mood about that? Because that's a major diplomatic issue that came out of that G20 summit.
Definitely, it is a major diplomatic issue. Now, what the South Africans felt was that the insult was just too much. Recall that Caroline Leavitt had said that the President Ramaphosa was running his mouth a little. And then they asked for him to hand over to the Deputy Chief of Mission here and an acting ambassador, which they said was absolutely insulting. It's also tying back to Ramaphosa's visit to the White House earlier, where they felt that he was ambushed and insulted. And for South Africans, they're very proud of Cyril Ramaphosa standing up to the United States president and continuing on. You know, as I said, what we're hearing from even the Norwegian prime minister, he said that the Americans' behavior was unacceptable. And he also spoke very highly of Cyril Ramaphosa. It's been a chorus here in South Africa from multiple world leaders. Now, Lamola, who's the Minister of International Relations and Cooperation, said that they can come to his office, the Durko office, to pick up the handover. Ramaphosa also said at the end of the summit that he doesn't mind going to America, of course, for the next G20, which will be in Miami. But it does seem that Ramaphosa has risen to the occasion.
Well, thank you very much, Adesuwa. Great job out there.